You have made criminal justice reform one of the main things you're talking about as a candidate. And you're also running on your record as a prosecutor in San Francisco and as the Attorney General of California. Riley Fink over here has a question about that. He's a senior here at Drake University studying political science. Riley?
Good evening, Senator. Thank you for being here. You position yourself as aligned with the progressive movement to make criminal justice less punitive and racist. Yet your record as a prosecutor shows that you embrace the tough on crime mentality. You've defended California's death penalty, and as California's Attorney General, your office opposed the release of nonviolent prisoners and violated the constitutional rights of various drug defendants. How do you reconcile your contradictory past with what you claim to support today?
I've been consistent my whole career. My career has been based on an understanding, one, that as a prosecutor, my duty was to seek and make sure that the most vulnerable and voiceless among us are protected. And that is why I have personally prosecuted violent crime that includes rape, child molestation, and homicide. And I have also worked my entire career to reform the criminal justice system, understanding, to your point, that it is deeply flawed and in need of repair, which is why, as Attorney General, for example, I led the Department of Justice, which is the largest state department of justice in any state, in California, and implemented the first of its kind in the nation implicit bias and procedural justice training for police officers. It is why I created the first in the nation for any Department of Justice an open data initiative that we named Open Justice, for the first time making transparent and showing the public statistics around deaths in custody, arrest rates by race, and making that information available to the public. I instituted a policy around requiring the agents who worked in my division, which is the first of its kind for a state agency, to wear body cameras. I created an initiative back when I was DA, and this is when, by the way, this is the 90s and the early 2000s, where you could talk to DAs around the country and you'd mention the word reentry and they didn't know what you were talking about. This is when there was a tough on crime mentality, and I created one of the first in the nation initiatives that was focused on re-entering former offenders by getting them jobs and training and counseling. And it ended up being something that, thankfully, in these ensuing 15 years, is something that is regularly talked about by district attorneys. But back when we created this, that was not happening. On the issue of the death penalty, I am personally opposed to the death penalty. I've always been opposed to the death penalty. And that's not going to change. It is a flawed system. It is applied unequally based on race and based on income. It is something that we know is flawed in that it is a final judgment, but we have seen many cases where DNA has proven that the person who was sentenced to death was not in fact guilty. And it is something that frankly costs the taxpayers of this country a lot of money, and is actually would be cheaper to let people spend their life and end their life in jail as opposed to that punishment of the death penalty. So on all of those issues, I will tell you that I am proud of my record, but I also do know there is a whole lot more work to be done in this country around criminal justice and reform of the system. We have a problem in this country of mass incarceration. We have a problem in this country of not having adequate response and consequence when young people who are unarmed are shot. We have a real problem in this country about disproportionate application of the law based on who is charged with a crime, what kind of bail is set for them, what kind of sentencing they receive, based on race. And there is a lot of work to do. That's the work that I've been doing also in the Senate, of focusing on that, such as a bill that I have that would seek to reform the bail system in the United States and ultimately get rid of the cash bail system, understanding that is disproportionately applied in a way that causes people who do not have $20,000 in their back pocket to have to sit in jail for what could be weeks, months, and years waiting trial, versus the people who have money get out while they're waiting trial. It's an economic justice issue as well as a criminal justice issue. But I appreciate your point. It is a flawed system, deeply flawed, and we have got to reform it, and everyone has to be on board. And we can't accept false choices, because I think we all realize it's a deeply flawed system, but we also want to make sure that when a woman is raped, a child is molested, one human being is killed by another human being, we also want to make sure there's going to be consequence, and serious consequence for those crimes. So I appreciate your question.
And Riley's question is, I'm sure you've been hearing this too, this is a criticism we're hearing of you from the left as you entered the fray. and they talk about things that you did as Attorney General or as prosecutor or as a district attorney in San Francisco.
Yeah.
Let me just ask about one of them,
Sure.
which is when you were Attorney General, you opposed a legislation that would have required your office to investigate fatal shootings involving police officers. Why did you oppose that bill?
So I did not oppose the bill. I had a process when I was Attorney General of not weighing in on bills and initiatives because as Attorney General, I had a responsibility for writing the title and summary. So I did not weigh in. But behind the scenes, I'm going to tell you, I compare my record to any prosecutor, any elected prosecutor in this country in terms of the work that I have done to reform the criminal justice system. I am a daughter of parents who met when they were active in the civil rights movement. Nobody had to teach me about the disparities in the criminal justice system. I was born knowing what they are. I made a conscious decision to become a prosecutor because I understood if we're going to reform systems, yes, there is going to be the power that we have on the outside, and also we need to have people on the inside where the decisions are being made. Which is why, as the chief prosecutor, I was able to not ask permission and to create initiatives that became models. The United States Department of Justice designated the initiatives that I created as a model of innovation in law enforcement for the United States. So there is my record, and there are some people who just believe that prosecutors shouldn't exist, and I don't think I'm ever going to satisfy them. But I will also say that there is so much more work to do, and do I wish I could have done more? Absolutely. I do wish I could have done more.
Let's turn to healthcare. I want to bring in Renee Welk, who lives here in Des Moines. She and her husband are both self-employed, and they've had a lot of trouble finding affordable health insurance. Renee?
Thank you so much. What is your solution to ensure that people have access to quality health care at an affordable price? And does that solution involve cutting insurance companies as we know them out of the equation?
I believe the solution, and I'm actually feel very strongly about this, is that we need to have Medicare for all. That's just the bottom line. And I'll say this, and this is, I think, why you're also asking this question. What we know is that to live in a civil society, to be true to the ideals and the spirit of who we say we are as a country, we have to appreciate and understand that access to health care it should not be thought of as a privilege. It should be understood to be a right. It should be understood to be something that all people should be entitled to so that they can live a productive life, so they can have dignity. And having a system that makes a difference in terms of who receives what based on your income is unconscionable, it is cruel, and in many situations that I have witnessed, inhumane. I have talked about my personal experience of my mother who passed away many years ago and going through the healthcare system with her. And she had the benefit of having Medicare, but not everybody does. And it is inhumane. It is inhumane to make people go through a system where they cannot literally receive the benefit of what medical science can offer, because some insurance company has decided it doesn't meet their bottom line in terms of their profit motivation. That is inhumane.
So just to follow up on that, and correct me if I'm wrong, to reiterate, you support the Medicare for All bill, I think initially co-sponsored by Senator Bernie Sanders. You're also a co-sponsor on it. I believe it will totally eliminate private insurance. So for people out there who like their insurance, they don't get to keep it?
Well, listen, the idea is that everyone gets access to medical care. And you don't have to go through the process of going through an insurance company, having them give you approval, going through the paperwork, all of the delay that may require. Who of us has not had that situation where you got to wait for approval and the doctor says, well, I don't know if your insurance company is going to cover this? Let's eliminate all of that. Let's move on.